Hello everyone and welcome to another Roker Report Extra podcast. I'm your host Chris Wynn and we're recording after another victory in League One. So surely we're expecting to hear an upbeat celebratory podcast. Or maybe not. Just to let you know as well that I might sound like I'm recording from the Western Front in 1917, but it is in fact fireworks outside, which you can no doubt hear in the background at some point during this podcast. But let's crack on and find out what today's guests have to say about our most recent victory. This week I'm delighted to welcome two people to review a pretty bizarre 2-1 victory over Ipswich Town at the Stadium of Light on Tuesday night. First we have someone who was fairly vocal in the player ratings pod immediately after the game, all the way from Gloucester. I'm very pleased to be joined by Bomber. How are you tonight?
All right, Chris. Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Have you calmed down a little bit after that immediate ratings podcast?
I have, but, we're about to bring up all those emotions again, so who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, let's see if you get fired up or you're all calm and philosophical about the victory now. Yeah. But we'll wait and see on that good stuff. And secondly, we have someone who I'm sure you will all recognise, and it's the first time I've been on an extra pod with him, and I think it might even be his extra pod debut. I'm pleased to say we're joined by Tom O'Brighton. How are you?
Hello, I'm all right. Long Benton's currently resembling a war zone, but bar that is we're all good, yeah.
Good stuff. So, 2-1 victory for Sunderland against a promotion rival. And one of the favourites to go up. That means we're now sitting in 6th, but only 4 points behind Peterborough, who are top and have a game in hand. And we have a game in hand even. And we've only lost 1 in 10 as well. So surely that all sounds really rosy for Sunderland. So we'll see what the lads have to say. And we'll start from the beginning and we'll start with the team selection. I mean, Conor McLaughlin is being given a run at the back in the back three. Charlie White keeps on scoring up top, so keeps his place. Captain Max Power has been dropped to the bench, so quite a few issues and things going on with the starting lineup. So I'll start with you, Bomber. Did you have an issue with the team selection that Phil Parkinson went with against Ipswich?
No, not really. I didn't have an issue with it. I was actually quite pleased to see McLaughlin staying at right centre back, because I think he's actually, the couple of times he's been in there, he's been pretty good for us. I think it's clear to see that he's not a right wing back, or that he shouldn't be a right wing back. But the few times he's been in that position, he's done, in my opinion, done pretty well defensively. I was quite surprised to see Max Power drop out. Parkinson's named him captain, so you'd anticipate that that's him starting every game for now and for eternity. I don't think he's necessarily put in the performances that warrant a starting place. So that was a little bit of a surprise. And, well, as for the up front, Charlie White keeps winning the lottery every week, doesn't he? So... and he's scoring goals, so he's going to be in there. Parkinson's got a reason to keep him in there, irrespective of what anybody thinks of him. And like I said, he is scoring goals. So yeah, not necessarily surprised, and I didn't really have a problem with it either.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, obviously we're looking at it, with hindsight, we know what happened in the game, but when the team was announced, can you remember having too many issues and thinking, he's done this and what's he doing?
No, not really. I think it's one of those, isn't it? We're limited in sort of certain areas with injuries and limitations, sort of, Jordan Willis being out, kind of injured, kind of not, or whatever situation that is. So he's basically put out the best team he could do. Again, I'd like to see a little bit more variation on the bench, but again, few injuries are kind of dictated that we can't do that. So really, I think if you're picking fault with that, you are just being a little bit sort of picky going into the game somewhat. Because, even though it wouldn't have been the first, everybody's favourite team to put out, still a fairly solid team.
Interesting. I'll probably come back to both of your comments there on Parkinson getting it right in terms of the team selection.
No. We didn't say you got it right. We just said you did get it wrong.
No. I heard praise from both of you there, so I'll pull you back up on that later on. Well, let's get in the game itself. We started off quite brightly. 8 minutes gone. Lyndon Gooch gets a ball into Charlie White's feet in the box with the help of some pretty awful defending. He took a couple of decent touches for once before slotting it home. Quite a decent opening goal that seemed to come out of nothing, Bomber.
Yeah, it was. It was early on anyway. The game hadn't really settled down. I think we were quite not fortunate. Well, we were fortunate in the way that the ball broke to Gooch in the first place, but full credit to him for the pass that came through. I think he split 2, possibly even 3 defenders. And for once, Charlie White's taken a touch and it's not got 5 yards away from him. It was a very good touch. And actually, I was quite impressed in that second piece of movement that he did, where he just cut across the defender to stop them making that challenge for the ball. And if they do challenge for the ball, there's an argument meant that they could be giving away a penalty. So that actually was, for me, was very good striking play. And it was actually, for Charlie White, quite a cool and calm and collected finish. But yeah, like I said, you can't say we necessarily deserved it, because it was too early on in the game to say. But I think for the pass, the control and the finish, it was very much deserved.
Right, I'm just going to write those notes down. For Bomber said that Charlie White was cool, calm, collected, and did good striking play.
For once, yeah.
I didn't hear the caveat in there. And I'm not convinced about that pass from Gooch's.
Are you not?
Through the eye of a needle, but I'm fairly certain the defence made a complete balls up of it. But anyway, nitpicking. Tom, on Charlie White, Bomber kind of mentioned how cool, calm and collected he was there. He scored 4 goals in our last 6 games, but there's still calls for Will Grigg to come in or Danny Graham to replace Charlie White. I mean, do you think it's as simple at the minute to say that he's the man in form, so he should keep his place?
Yes and no. I think you've got an argument either side. It was mentioned a few weeks ago, probably on consecutive podcasts even, is one thing we had to do was stop rotating the strikers, because the strikers weren't forming up any partnerships with any players out wide. And sort of it was evidenced, starting to see the evidence now as well in favour of it. Balls coming in from either side is White was never really, wasn't anticipating them, wasn't getting across his man. He kind of didn't know what was going to be coming into the area. Same with Graham, same with Grigg, is none of them really struck up a partnership. Now you're seeing White spend a little bit more time in there, probably courtesy of a few, spawny goals, but you can see him reacting better to crosses. There's just 3 or 4 times during the game and 3 or 4 times last week. White, he's looked to get in front of his man, or he's read an early ball into the box, and there's just little partnerships like that that's kind of justifying why he's staying in there. I think a lot of people want to see him gone or see a change purely because the temptation of when White is on the pitch to just hit it long is ridiculous, and it's something that there's certain players in the team can't let go of it. So I think what White represents at the moment is a brand of football that nobody's really enjoying watching. It's a very attritional game of football, but Charlie White's a very attritional footballer. So you can see the argument for why you can stay in the team, because you've got a striker that's scoring goals, and at the end of the day, you judge a striker on how many goals they score, but he does represent something which is kind of a cloud that's hanging over the results at the moment, which is, quite frankly, the football is just not enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, compared to social media, after the game, you two were being very politically correct about the names you're picking for Charlie White, attritional and cool, calm, collected. I wouldn't like to compare those to some of the other words that we used.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, Chris, is that, and I'm going to say, I might sound absolutely ridiculous in saying this, because he has scored, 4 league goals now, is that for the rest of the game, for me, he doesn't do anything. He has missed chances, which you would have put your money on other strikers putting away. I just don't see anything else that he offers. And like I said, I'm going to sound stupid, because the thing he's there to do is score goals, and he's done that in the last few weeks. But I've got more faith in some of the other strikers contributing more to the game as a whole. And maybe not necessarily scoring the goals themselves, although you'd like to back Graham and Grigg to score goals, but doing more to actually make the football a little bit more palatable.
Well, on that, Bomber, I mean, Tom mentioned it there. Do you think that even though Charlie White's scoring the goals and he's doing what it says in the tin, that he's there to score goals, that's what he needs to do. But Tom kind of touched on that point, what you just mentioned there, that Charlie White, in a sense, he doesn't do the things that people want to see from a Sunderland striker. Like, he doesn't, when Maguire's got the ball or Lyndon Gooch, he doesn't look, for those runs in behind. He doesn't get it to feet. He doesn't do something entertaining with it. I mean, is that part of it, that he doesn't do what people want him to do or want a striker to do for Sunderland?
Yeah, I think so. I think that fundamentally, as football fans, and certainly as football fans of what you might call lower league clubs now, because I think in essence that's what we are currently. You want to see one of two things. You want to see 110% effort, closing down, work rate, etc., or you want to see little individual bits of flair. Now, Chris Maguire against Ipswich did both and has the capability of doing both. Charlie White kind of doesn't do either. So you don't necessarily see him belting around the pitch, trying to close people down, trying to close a goalkeeper down, trying to close a fullback down. And you also certainly don't see any sort of flair from him. So you then start to question, as a football fan, what is that striker doing? And you don't like to see it because you're not seeing one or the other. And he does fall victim to that. Some of it will be his own doing, some of it because he's not that sort of player, some of it will be because we tend to play long balls into him. But I think fundamentally, if someone's sat in front of a screen watching Charlie Wyke for 90 minutes, you struggle to come out of a game having watched it thinking, what has he contributed? Again, I'm going to say stupid because he's contributed goals in the last few games, but to the game as something that's palatable to watch, what has he contributed to it? And I put him under too much of a microscope, but I see a ball go into his feet and it banks 5 yards off and we lose possession, or I see him try and hold the ball up and then play a square ball to one of the wide players and it goes out of play or it gets intercepted. And it's those things that I pick up on rather than the fact that, for 30 seconds of a 90-minute game, he's scored a goal and he's been in the right place at the right time. Maybe I'll come into criticism for that, but
just to put a full stop on it, Tom, is that the contradiction with Charlie Wyke, that almost you could say he's a traditional League One striker and we're maybe expecting a bit too much from him? Are we being unfair on him?
Don't think we're being unfair on him, because at the end of the day, we're a club where we shouldn't be in League One. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to be in League One, you've got to find yourself Championship footballers. So, if you lower your expectation, you just lower yourself to expecting to be a League One club. So having high expectations isn't a bad thing necessarily. I think ultimately the way you could probably describe the issue with Charlie Wyke, to kind of draw to a point, is a lot of frustration from people comes from the fact that a lot of people feel that Wyke has been afforded more opportunities than other strikers who probably are more deserving or who do deserve that opportunity. You look at Will Grigg, for instance. He's not really had an opportunity this season, but during pre-season, we saw him trim down, we saw him bulk up, and we saw him get fitter, and the reward for that has been scant. The thing with Kimpioka's deal, yes, it dragged on, but he's been banging goals in for the under-21s, yet he doesn't even seem anywhere near the bench. So there's a lot of fans looking at it going, look, the strikers here who are making effort outside of the pitch, because that's the only place they can make this effort is outside of the game day, and then they're not being given an opportunity, whereas Wyke seems to just stumble from game to game almost, and just stumble upon opportunities and stumble upon goals. Because you see there 4 and 6, I would say 3 of those have come from, quite frankly, horrific defending. So it's not like he's carving these chances out for himself. So, I don't think it's necessarily being harsh, but I do think there's just an overriding frustration there that there's a lot of people feel that he's kind of just stumbling through games and it doesn't look like he's putting that effort in. Whereas his other players are absolutely chomping at the bit and they just can't get an opportunity, while Wyke's just given chance after chance after chance.
Well, let's leave the Charlie Wyke debate behind for now, just with the reminder that Bomber said he was cool, calm and collected.
We
can move on. Getting back to the game, I thought for the first 25-30 minutes, I thought we looked really bright in terms of really pressing Ipswich in their own half when they were in possession. But in possession, we seemed kind of following on from where we left off in previous games, kind of slow and ponderous when we had the ball. Do you think that's a fair assessment of the open period, Bomber?
Yeah. I thought I was actually very impressed with our first 25-30 minutes defensively. In particular, the person for me, at least, that stood out in that period was off the ball, at least, was Chris Maguire. The work rate that he put in, and I think he probably burnt himself out in that first 25 minutes or so, because he was putting the goalkeeper and the entire back line of Ipswich under pressure just constantly. And the amount of times that we won the ball back in midfield or at the back because we were forcing them to play long and play rushed passes was largely down to him. I thought the back three looked very well organised that first period. I just think that we kind of panicked Ipswich a little bit. But unfortunately, it did look like we kind of blew ourselves a gasket a little bit on the 30-minute mark. And it just seemed to, out of nowhere, the performance just completely 180'd. And we looked like the team under pressure and that was a little bit scared to do anything with it. But I wasn't surprised at how lacking we were going forward, because that's been the way that we've approached games and the way that we've performed in games throughout the season, not just in the last couple of weeks. That's been the story of our season. But it was nice to see, at least for that half-hour period, the defence and the defensive display back up to the levels that we've actually come to expect from a Phil Parkinson Sunderland side this season.
As you mentioned, we're kind of tailed off for the last kind of quarter of an hour of the first half, the final kind of 15 minutes. And Ipswich got an equaliser. Tom, do you think there was a question mark over maybe our defending for that goal? And would it maybe be harsh to say Bird should have done better?
Bird's one probably harsh. I think he's done the best he can. He's, come out, close the angle down. Kid's just hit a rasper at the end of the day. It's gone in off the inside of the post. Looks like he's got a bit of a fingertip onto it. But the bigger problem obviously comes before then, and I did write it down because I wanted to make a point of this, is for all we praise the pressing, and it is something that should be praised because we do hassle and harry teams. But one thing I've noticed in the past couple of weeks is for some reason there'll be a brief moment in the game where the pressing just stops. And I don't know if other people noticed it, especially against Gillingham. There was a case where a lot of people were getting in on Hume for conceding the cross on the left. But just before that, Hume's the only one who's pressing the ball. So he gets caught in a 2v1. And from that moment on, he's playing catch-up. And the same kind of happened against Ipswich. I think it's O'Nien. He's pressing fairly high. He's pressing almost on the halfway line, which is fantastic. You want your wing. That's where you want your wing back pressing at the end of the day. But nobody else was pressing. So it was I think it was one or two passes and they're out the way. And then, they've set up a 1v1. They've got a winger driving in at centre-back in McLaughlin, who, he's not the quickest, we'll be honest. And that kind of sets the ball rolling. So it's one of those. The defence is, it's decent, but that press needs to be consistent.
Yeah, that system of play only works if you've got 4, 5, 6 players all adopting the same principle,
Well, on that, Tom, as I said, after 25, 30 minutes, it was almost kind of perfect for that first half an hour. But what do you think happens? Do you think it's a matter of concentration, or do you think there's an element of fitness in there as well?
You could probably level both, to be honest. I think a lot of players are still catching up fitness-wise from the COVID break. I think some players use it as a chance to get really super fit. I think few players use it as a chance to sit on the arse, which, it's up to them. I think it's just a concentration thing. Obviously, you're not expecting pressing of that level for 90 minutes. So I think it's, you see top teams doing it. Maybe it's something we need to look at where you press in bursts. So, you're opening 15 minutes, especially at home, push teams, harry them, get them into mistakes. But then you need to pick a time where you go, right, we're just going to, ease back a little bit. We're going to try and control the play, get on the ball a bit more. Right, 10 minutes before half time, we're going to really push these again. And I think that, going forward, that would be something to look at, because I don't think you can press with that intensity, both concentration-wise and fitness-wise, for 90 minutes. It's just not possible, especially when your two wing-backs are going to be playing 90 minutes.
Yeah. Bomber, in terms of that goal, Tom said, we seem to lose it a bit when defending from the front. But considering how solid our back three have been, do you think we've been maybe overestimating how good our back three are, considering how much they've been tested? Or do you think maybe they're having a bit of a blip?
I'd like to think it's just a bit of a blip, because I do think that I wouldn't necessarily agree that they've not been tested. I think they have been tested, but they've just stood up to that test remarkably well up to the last couple of weeks or so, and have probably made it look easier than it actually has been. That said, it was disappointing to see that goal being conceded after we started so well, defensively at least. It was very disappointing to just see that one, and it was only that one error up to that point, kind of let them in and gave them the opportunity. That was disappointing, but I've got faith in the shape that we adopt and the players that we've got in those positions. I think it's quite clear that everybody who could possibly play that position knows how to play that position now, or knows the style of play that Phil Parkinson wants us to have defensively. And I'm confident in that. It's the other end that I have issues with. I come into every game watching confident that the chances are we're only going to see one at best.
Yeah.
But I say it's the other end that concerns me more, really.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come back onto that before we finish, Bomber. So 1-1 at half time. Second half started pretty much the same way as the first. Scruffy and a bit of a slog to watch. Then 72 minutes gone, Tom. Andre Dazal is sent off for a tackle on Ledbetter. Now, the footage and the replay didn't really clear it up. There was a lot of people, when I first saw it, I thought there was nothing to it. I thought it was a bit of a nothing tackle. Seen a couple of screen grabs, which kind of make it, muddy the waters a little bit. But did you get a feeling it was a sending off?
Again, same as you, sort of seeing it again. Watched the highlights again this morning, just to, kind of refresh. And I thought, it doesn't look like much. But then you see the screen grabs, you see his foot's up, his studs are raised, kind of thing. And then obviously the league will come out and says, look, we're upholding the red card. So there's obviously enough footage here to prove it, because there's one thing we've found out over in League One so far, is they will rescind a red card when it's given incorrectly, because the amount we've had rescinded kind of tells you that. So, no, I think in the end, you can probably see it was good refereeing if kind of the league says, yeah, you were bang on, that is a red card. And, Ipswich can complain, but from the stills, it just looks like his foot's high, his studs are up. And at the end of the day, all it needs to be is, your foot needs to be like that for a split second and you can go, can't you?
Well, I think with the one camera available at each ground at the minute, I think the FA had just thrown all the appeals out the window and saying, nope, go with the referee's decision. Well, another decision 12 minutes later, Bomber, we got a penalty for a handball. I mean, would you have been disappointed if that was given against us?
I think you would be. I think in those sorts of situations, if you're on the wrong end of that decision, you'll always feel hard done by. I said it on the player ratings pod. I stand by it now. It's a stonewall penalty all day long for me, and it's by the letter of the law. It's a penalty. And now, don't get me wrong, I think the handball rules themselves are a bag of shite, but the actual decision itself is, by the letter of the law, a penalty. If you were in Champions League or in the Premier League, VAR would be pulling that back and they'd be going, "Oh, hang on, ref, that's a penalty." So I've got no qualms with it whatsoever. But it's the contentious rule that's the issue. So I think if it was given against us, I wouldn't complain, but you'd still be disappointed.
Yeah. And then obviously Grant Ledbetter converts the penalty and we win 2-1. I mean, another 3 points. As we said earlier, we're keeping tabs on the top, as we mentioned at the top of the pod. But I mean, Tom, again, I think we're probably on every single pod, especially immediately after games, we always keep coming back to the performance. I mean, as far as you're concerned, do you look at the performance as, it was just an awful performance and we got out of jail? Or do you think we were well organised, and as long as you do that, you're always in with a chance of winning the game?
A bit in between, I think. I think you've kind of halfway there with it, because the decent teams in this division are organised. They know that, each individual knows the job defensively. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not organised. And I think we've seen that from, the past few seasons before, where we've looked at 6s and 7s at the back at times, and it just comes back to bite you. The performances as a whole, though, they're a bit Jekyll and Hyde. I think if you're a person who doesn't mind defensive football, attritional football, then, and results are the only thing that matters to you, then, yeah, fair enough. You've not really got grounds for any complaint. However, looking forward and looking at the evolution of this side as well, because, with football, you've got to think 12 months ahead, really. You've got to always be thinking, 2 or 3 steps ahead of yourself. And like someone put in the group the other day, if this side got promoted with Phil Parkinson to the Championship, it's just coming straight back down, because the other side of, yes, we may be organised defensively, so on and so forth, is essentially all our performances are doing is trying not to concede and then playing enough football or getting the ball into the opposition half enough that we're just banking on them making mistakes. There's been 2 or 3 games this season we've been bailed out by penalties and red cards, not through us, with waves and waves of attacks or breaking teams down because they just simply can't keep us out anymore. It's teams that have defended fairly comfortably against us, but then have just made a stupid mistake. You go back to the Peterborough game. Were we the better side? Marginally. Were we the better attacking side? I didn't think we were. I think on another day, Peterborough could have put 3 or 4 past us. So we were lucky in that sense. And then we've ended up winning that game because of just one half-decent attack and the defender making a stupid tackle. The Ipswich game here we're talking about is there was 2, Ipswich were, after the half an hour mark, were probably on top. there was 2 moments where Ipswich have given the initiative away with the red card and with the penalty. So again, it's teams making mistakes, handing us these things. You can only ride your luck for so long before that runs out. And the problem we've got going forward is, yes, we may be defensively sound, but if you're defensively sound and you're only conceding, you're not conceding, or you're only conceding 1 goal, what happens when the goals dry up the other end? Because those 1-0 wins and those 2-1s all of a sudden become 1-1s, 0-0s. And then, because Parkinson hasn't won enough, he drops dangerously into that territory where Jack Ross was, where there wasn't enough wins. It was too many draws. It was too stale. It was not enough goals. There was not enough excitement. There was just not, in all the departments, it was just that little bit that was missing. When you put it all together, it's something that can go really sour really quickly, as we saw with Jack Ross. So in a sense, I am concerned with the performances, although the results are good and, the table makes for reading. The table only tells part of the story. So I think anyone criticising it does have a fair point at the moment, because I honestly think we're 2 or 3 bad results away from dropping down the table fairly quickly and things going very, very sour.
Bomber, just to bring you in on kind of the level of performance. I mean, we're here talking about it again. What is it? We're talking almost kind of 10 games into the season. We keep getting results, though. I mean, at some point, do we say that it's not luck that we're getting these results? And should we care if we're still winning? We're almost a quarter of a way through the season, and we could go a point within the team who's top of the league. So, I mean, should we care that much about the performance?
So we absolutely should, Chris. So I've come into criticism for myself for kind of slagging off the performances that we've had and saying, why aren't you happy we've won the game, etc., etc. But
you criticism, Bomber.
Well, I know.
For a second, mate.
I know. When you're on that player ratings pod, for example, you're there to rate performances, not whether we've got 3 points or not. And the performances just aren't good enough. The problem that I've got, and again, I will probably come into criticism because I said we're 5th or 6th in the league and 4 points off the top. But I've got, again, I sit down and go in to watch every game with absolutely no confidence that we're going to win a game. The performances haven't been there throughout the whole season. I think the only time we played any sort of decent football was when we hoyed 8 past Villa or Villa's kids. But it's one thing saying, okay, yeah, we're getting the results, but we are getting the results through fortune or through the opposition handing us opportunities to go and take 3 points. We're not carving out those opportunities for ourselves. We're certainly not scoring enough goals. And just for that alone, it kind of puts us on the back foot in terms of pushing for the automatic places. I mean, if you look, I've got the top scorer list in front of me for League One, and you go into the top 12, and there's not a Sunderland player in sight, and yet Portsmouth have got John Marquis and Marcus Harness both in the top 5. You've got teams like AFC Wimbledon and Burton, who are pretty poor sides, have got players in that top 12, and you have to go all the way down to I think about 19th until you get to Charlie White. And there's a lot of teams in that 12 that have got 2 players in there for goals and assists. So those teams are going to do it, and they'll probably concede more goals than us over a season, but they'll go out and win more games because they're capable of creating more chances and therefore scoring more goals. It's that end of the pitch that I'm in dire concern about, really. And people can argue with me about it or say I'm wrong or whatever, but it's goals that essentially win you games, and the winning games is what gives you the points to go out the leagues. And I don't think anybody can hand on heart sit there and say that they've gone into any game this season and said, we're going to outplay these and we're going to beat them, we're going to outscore them. It might have happened in hindsight, but no one can look forward and say that they're confident of it happening.
Yeah, I think to expand on what Bomber's saying there as well, which I totally agree with, is you get away with it at the start of the season, because at the start of the season, teams haven't got that fear built into them. There's a lot of teams don't actually know what they're going to be playing for a quarter of the way into the season. When we get halfway into the season and teams are looking forward and they're looking at the playoff places, or they're looking at the automatics, or there's 6 or 7 teams looking over the shoulder thinking, shit, we're a couple of bad results away from getting dragged into this. That's when it's going to come and bite you. When teams don't come up and think, oh, well, we'll have a bit of a go. You know, when teams start coming to the Stadium of Light and going, look, lads, we just need to play for a draw. We're just going to, you know, 2 banks of 5 will just frustrate the life out of them. That's when it's going to hit. It's not going to hit now. It's going to hit further along in the season when teams are going to come and they're going to try and grind out results and they're going to try and defend the way to a point and all the rest of it. Or, you know, and the other thing is what happens if we hit a Peterborough or a Portsmouth who are in really good form, you know, and you've got to go down to Fratton Park and, you know, Portsmouth have won, you know, 5 of the last 5 games or whatever, and they've scored 2 or 3 goals a game. Is what realistically, what are we going to do then? Are we good enough to dry teams up who are in that kind of form and then beat them 1-0 away from home? And performances suggest that we probably aren't.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier on, Tom, about, you know, the prospect of actually getting promoted. And you see a whole mix of clubs when they get promoted, you know, the likes of, you know, would go way back when, you know, go like the likes of Wolves went up with a whole, you know, host of momentum, playing really good football, and then carried that on. Southampton, Leicester, when they got promoted out of League One. And then you got the likes of Wickham, okay, smaller club, but they kind of limped over the line, and now they're paying for it. But I mean, you know, would you be that bothered if we went up by sticking with these methods and we're kind of just worried about next season, you know, next summer?
I would be, yeah, because what you've got to think of then is going into next summer, we don't know what's happening with the COVID and that going forward. So we could end up in a situation where you've only got a 2-3 week break, you know, something similar to what we've had between the end of last season and the start of this. To go up with these methods and then say, right, we're going to change once we get in a division higher is really, really risky. For some teams, it may work. You look at the likes of Wolves where they just kind of spend. But yes, it's worked. But what would have happened to Wolves if it didn't work? They would have been in a world of pain with financial irregularities and all the rest of it, because everybody knows they spent way, way more. And it was that kind of gamble on going up. It's a huge, huge gamble to take, because the last thing you want to do is, you know, go up to the Championship and spend your first 6 or 7 games, which when you get newly promoted, you kind of just want to get through, pick up a couple of wins at home, pick up a couple of draws away, sort of get 10 or so points on the board as quickly as possible just to get yourself settled. Last thing you need to be doing when you're chasing those early points is trying to reinvent your style of play. And I think that's been evidenced by sort of like, as you watch teams go through divisions, kind of, you know, Lincoln have been pointed out a few times, is Lincoln have kind of stuck to one style of play and they've utilised that to get through the divisions. And there's a lot of teams done that. You look at Leeds now, Leeds are doing all right in the Premier League, but they've implemented a style of play under Bielsa and they've just done that the higher up the tiers they get. And it's that continuity that I think puts you in good stead going forward. And I think to kind of go, right, we'll do this to get out of the division, but then we're going to have to do something completely the opposite to remain in the division we're going into. It's very, very risky. And I would, without going into it too much, I would dare say it probably fails as many times as it succeeds.
Yeah, watching a Bielsa team play after watching a Phil Parkinson team play can reduce you to tears. But I mean, just the last point on the level of performance, Bomber. Not just Sunderland, but if you see the opponents that were playing, I mean, even some of the Premier League games on the TV, Championship games, I've seen a couple of those. I mean, they've all seemed kind of low on intensity, low on quality. I mean, do you think overall, and, you know, bringing it back to Sunderland's performances, that playing without fans is having some impact?
I think it does. I think it does play a part and have an impact. I think Sunderland are in a bit of a unique position in that they are probably one of the few teams that are actually, or should be benefiting in the current climate, should be benefiting from not having fans in the stadium. We're in League One for a 3rd season. We saw around about Christmas time last season how bad it can get at the Stadium of Light. So, you know, the players this season should be going into home games with that sense of freedom at home, and then without the intimidation factor away. So, you know, we're in a bit of a unique position in that it should be beneficial. So I'm loath to give it out as an excuse for our performances, and certainly for our lack of goals. You know, there's much smaller teams and much, well, if we're saying it, but much worse teams on paper paper at least than us that are still managing to put to create chances, etc. And they're equally playing behind closed doors and without fans in there. So I'm loath to use that as an excuse. I think as Sunderland fans, we're a little bit spoiled, I guess, and frustrated, and it's not a good mix in that we see, as you've mentioned, we've seen the likes of Man City, of Southampton, of Leicester, of Leeds go down into the third tier, bounce back up, and more often than not, in those cases at least, it's been with a certain aplomb that there's this breath of fresh air throughout the club. I think if we'd have gone up on the first season of coming into League One, then we may well have kicked on from there. But I think we're now into our third season. The squad hasn't really evolved. There's been player rotation. Some people have come in, some people have left, but I don't see the squad as any better. And people are frustrated. People are frustrated that the club hasn't kicked on in the same ilk as a Man City, as a Leicester, as a Southampton, and are probably bearing that frustrations out at the Stadium of Light. So with the fans not there, it's not an excuse for the players for me.
Okay, so you started out saying Phil Parkinson's not making any mistakes with the team selections, but the performances aren't great, but the results aren't bad, being close to the top of League One. So me and Craig spoke with Brett last week and gave our views about Phil Parkinson as manager of the club. And I'll ask you first, Tom. Do we persevere with Phil Parkinson and trust that he will get us promoted and implement a plan after that point?
Personally, for me, it's just a resounding no. For me, I'm looking you look at the managers who are currently out of work, managers you might be able to get. There's a lot more progressive managers, managers who, they ingrain a plan, they have a very defined style of play. You know what you're getting with them. Sort of the name that's been on my lips the past couple of weeks is the Cowley brothers. Kind of everywhere they've gone so far. I know it's a young career, but they've been innovative. They've utilised a mix of experience in youth players. They have taken Lincoln far beyond where they ever dreamed. They kept the Huddersfield side that looked destined to go down in the Championship on an absolute shoestring of a budget. And I just kind of feel like if we want to progress as a club, I know we've mentioned that, Leicester, Leeds, Southampton, all that, is those clubs, when they were in the third tier, they set the sights really high. They said, we're going to be a Premier League club in X amount of years. And then what they did was they implemented a series of plans which allowed them to do that, which involved managers' styles of play and, kind of ethical ways to go about the football. Now, if we want to do that, we've got the same, because it's all well and good saying, we're a Premier League side just stuck in League One and it's temporary and all the rest of it. But unless you start, putting those procedures in place, you're not just going to fluke your way at the Premier League, because no side does that. And that's why I kind of feel we're not going to do it under Parkinson, because we have fluked, a fair few of our results this season. We did fluke a few wins last season as well. And it just seems that Parkinson kind of stumbles on something that works, and it works for a finite period of time, goes wrong, and then he starts to tinker and stumbles on something else. That's not progressive. That's not progressive management. That is just reacting to what's happening in front of you. And you see it with his substitutions in game as well. It's like a small snapshot of how he works. He's not progressive. He's not the man who makes the first substitution. He's not the man who'll change the shape or, add a bit of pace when it's needed or whatever. It's all very reactive. And I think when you're reactive, you're regressive. You've got to be progressive in football. You've got to be looking forward. So for me, that's what we need to do. We need to kind of implement more of a plan than just going, we'll see where we are and then we'll adapt accordingly, because that's not going to get you. It's only going to get you so far. And I think, given the access to youth players we have, the quality of training facilities we have, and things surrounding the club, is I honestly think, we need to be looking at managers like the Cowleys who, use these data metrics to sign players and pluck them from leagues in teams you've never heard of, and unearth these kind of like, lower league stars. So, in a respect, because that's how we're going to progress. And if you give these managers who've got the core skills, who've never really been afforded the budgets or the facilities, if you allow them to really expand themselves, is these are the kind of managers who can really push your club forward, as an entity. And yes, sure, if you got to the Championship, and you stagnate, at least you've got a blueprint. So you've got a defined set of managers you can go for and work from a blueprint and move forward with that. And I can't see any of that with Parkinson. He doesn't favour youth. He hasn't really got a defined style of play apart from, we'll just lump it up with Charlie White and hope the defence fuck up. Like, you know what I mean? There's nothing there that kind of thinks, I can't wait to see where we are in 5-6 months' time. Whereas you might do with someone who's a bit more exciting and a bit more innovative.
Since Tom's sitting on the fence there, Bomber, about Phil Parkinson, not resounding no there that we should persevere with him. I mean, do you think there's a good enough reason, a solid reason, why we should get rid of Phil Parkinson, considering, I mean, where we are on the table, how that's looking, and the fact that if we look at our fixtures, we've got a bit of a tough run of games coming. Home to MK Dons, away to Doncaster, and away to Fleetwood. Is there a good, solid basis to say, yeah, let's get rid of the manager, let's change it up?
So, firstly, I'm going to caveat and say that I agree with everything that Tom's saying about you need a progressive manager if you want to achieve things, and that Phil Parkinson is almost like the antithesis of that. However, professional football, and certainly professional management in football, is a results game. And, nobody has ever, the only person I can ever remember being sacked for purely just because they played what was perceived to be boring football or rubbish football was Sam Allardyce at Everton.
And West Ham.
Yeah. But the results for both of those weren't disastrous. But yeah, aside from that anomaly, football is a results business. And one thing that you can't say is that on paper, Phil Parkinson is getting results. So to answer your question as to whether he should go, no, he shouldn't at the minute, and nor will he. If you're asking me whether I think he's the right man to get us promoted and ultimately set a foundation as being a solid championship side with a future goal of being back into the Premier League, absolutely not. I think if a Phil Parkinson team gets promoted to the Championship, it's a side that's going to be struggling, fighting against relegation the following season. But I just simply cannot advocate him being sacked whilst we've only lost one game all season. We're 4 points from top with a game in hand. I find myself continually conflicted about it because I'm not happy with the performances. I'm not confident going into any game, as I've said a couple of times, that we're gonna win it, and yet we are. So I can't really be calling for the manager's head. I think it would be unfair. I think we've got ourselves in a position now where he's almost bought himself a little bit of breathing space. So I think what it would take now is for us to go, particularly in this run of the next few games, to go winless in 3 or 4 for his job to seriously be in jeopardy. Because say the results stack up at the minute, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, there you go. Splinters in your arse again there, Bomber. Caveats all over the place. Well, we were supposed to be a bit of a preview as well for the FA Cup game, which is next up at home to Mansfield Town. I mean, Tom, how much do we care about a cup run at the moment?
I think as fans, we probably don't care that much. Obviously, the priority is getting out of this shithole of a league, really, isn't it? And that's got to be number one on everyone's agenda. However, current situation dictates that maybe whilst the fans might not be bothered, the people who are bankrolling the football club might be very bothered. I mentioned this in the group the other day when there was a small discussion on it. I think League One clubs cannot, financially cannot afford to not have a cup run this season. I think that is something that could very well separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to spending a little bit of money in January. Looking forward, if you get to January, you've got a 3rd round cup tie against a Championship or potentially a Premier League side. You've got a bit of money coming in somehow, somewhere, whether it be from streams or, prize money being dished out or whatever. If the draw's kind to you, you could probably even sneak your way into the 4th round if you get a couple of good results. Because I think financially speaking, a cup run could be quite important. It could be an injection of, a couple of 100,000 plus that, could make a bit of a difference when the clubs haven't exactly got money rolling in. So from a personal point of view, not particularly bothered about how far we go in the FA Cup because we know for a fact we're not going to win it. However, from a financial point of view, could, if you fluke yourself into the fourth round, get yourself a little tie against, Man City or Liverpool, you're on Sky Sports or whatever, the money's rolling in then, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, fucking hell, I'm glad we've done that when you've got a new striker rolling through the door in January because you've cashed yourself 500-600 grand or something just by getting there.
I can't wait to see us getting stuffed off Liverpool or Manchester United on Sky Sports. That sounds like just the job at the minute. But just quickly on that game, Bomber. I mean, obviously an opportunity for Phil Parkinson to rotate the squad a bit. But just a quick point on that: is there a potential scenario where Phil Parkinson, rotates it up, brings in some of the players, so he's got Will Grigg in there, Diamond, Neil. He throws them all in. They all have a great game, get a hat-trick each, all of that sort of stuff. And then Phil Parkinson is completely slaughtered when they're nowhere to be seen for the next game in terms of the starting 11.
Yeah, it's dependent on how Parky approaches this game. It's almost like a free hit for him. But you're quite right, he could make a headache for himself. Just to come back onto Tom's point about the financial aspects of an FA Cup run. For us, Tom, it's not going to make that much difference. So the prize money for the FA Cup, so to win, if you win your third round tie, it's 82 grand. Second round tie is 34 grand, and first round tie is 22 grand for a winner. So it doesn't get into six figures until you get into the fifth round in the quarterfinals. Yeah. So I think for smaller clubs than us, I think you're right. But I think for us, it's not going to make that much of a difference unless we were somehow got into the fifth round in the quarterfinals. However, coming back to what you were saying, Chris, for me, I don't necessarily care about this game, but for me, it's how Phil Parkinson approaches it. Like I said, he's potentially got a free hit for it. If he uses it as an opportunity to give some of the younger players, your Diamonds, your Neils, a chance, your Embletons, a chance to come in and at least give him something to think about going into this next run of league games, and we end up, with a 0-0, a reasonable performance, and then winning or even losing on penalties. For me personally, I'm not really that bothered about it. If he persists to play his strongest side with it, and we come up short, then I'll have a massive issue with it. So for me, I'd like to see him give, even Kimpioka, if he's fit enough, Will Grigg, Neil, Embleton. I want to see all those play at least 45 minutes of football and give Parkinson something to think about. If he does that, the result for me is immaterial. As long as these guys are giving a good account of themselves.
Yeah. Well, let's leave that extensive preview of that FA Cup game behind, since you've both said you don't care about the game. Thanks again to everyone listening. Please subscribe and like and give us lots of stars and all of that sort of jazz if you enjoyed it. It's much appreciated. But from the three of us today, it's bye for now.